Morning, everyone. Thank you to Budget and Makoto Foundation for inviting me and for bringing us together, and to my brother Abubakar for making my job very easy. So I'm just going to build on the foundation that he has laid. So I do so many things. One of the things I do is I'm an associate professor where I lecture PhD students. And recently, I asked them a question. We're talking about development finance. So I asked them a question about, is Nigeria a rich country with rich people, or a rich country with poor people? Or is it a poor country with rich people? Or is it a poor country with poor people? More than 90% of my students, and these are executives, thought that it's either A or B. In other words, Nigeria is either a rich country with rich people or a rich country with poor people. I suspect that if I ask you that question, your answers are likely to be similar to my class. But unfortunately, if you interrogate further, you will quickly realize that they were talking about the potential of the country. And I love it when Abubakar said, we are blessed. Unfortunately, that blessing, you can't use it to buy food. You can't use it to pay your rent, because it's not real. You have the resources on the ground. You can't spend it. So based on data, sentiments apart, the reality is that Nigeria is a poor country with loads of very poor people. That is our reality, but it doesn't have to be that way. So I want to start by looking at the context, exploring tax reforms and non-oil revenue direction. And the context for me is that the Nigerian fiscal and tax space is ill. You can in fact say maybe it's under intensive care. Now, because the system is ill, you have to be able to separate the symptom from the illness itself. Some of the symptoms of that illness is the low tax to GDP ratio, is the rising debt profile. It is the high cost of funding that borrowing. It is the fact that we have informal taxes being collected by non-state actors, estimated in some cases to be more than the IGR of some states. There was an estimation that the Agberos in Lagos collect over 100 billion naira a year. I have not seen, I'm waiting to see, one road that they have fixed in Lagos State. Yet that revenue they collect is more than the IGR of any state in Nigeria other than the top 5 states. And we pretend like everything is okay. The symptom also include implicit taxes. This is when, after paying your taxes, if you had paid, you then have to take care of what government should normally be doing for you as the fiscal exchange for the taxes you have paid. We have all manners of earmarked taxes. Government says, maybe we cannot fund education and we think we should be funding it. Can we set up a tertiary education tax fund and ask people to pay? Fast forward, it's not working. Somebody will say, maybe we need science and technology, Naseni levy, ask companies to pay. Somebody will say, actually, we also think there is a bit of information technology, need that levy, ask companies to pay. Oh, someone will say, oh, how about NYC? Maybe we are not funding it enough, NYC levy. Every single thing, you think that the problem is revenue, but that's a secondary problem, right? The more of this you have, the more the problems you create. Not only do we have those multiple taxes and earmark levies, we also have multiplicity of agencies collecting those revenues. And I'm not surprised, because I've seen that before when Abubakar said, there are places. Those places could be a state, it could be local government, where consultants that have been asked to collect taxes take as much as 35%. But of course, we know it's not because the cost of collecting tax is that high. It's because some guys are making money for themselves at the expense of the country and of the people. It's even more painful that those expenses are not reported. They take their own money from the source before they report the revenue. And then we say the revenue is not enough. Anyway, those are the symptoms. The real issue is that we often mistake, right, the symptoms for the disease itself. Now, if you do not correctly diagnose an ailment and prescribe the right solutions, chances are that you will never be able to cure it. In fact, after you have prescribed, you have to diligently administer that prescription while you are monitoring the recovery of that patient. So the real issue for us, the real problem for us is that the social contract is broken. The whole essence of government is that we have collectively agreed that we need order, that we need the rule of law, that we need to be civil. And then, of course, we can't take care of ourselves all by ourselves. You cannot, if you want to drive from here to Ibadan, you can't build the road just to drive. If you want to fly from here to Kaduna, even if you are Aliko Dangote or Bill Gates, who is in Nigeria now, you can't build the airport everywhere you want to fly to. We say, let's come together and contribute. And then we appoint some servants to serve us and spend the money. That's how government is supposed to work. That contract is broken, resulting in poor tax culture and low tax morale. In one of my activities, I headed the research table for the NESD, and we got some funding from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We did a national study on tax morale in Nigeria. Even for me, I was surprised when I saw the results. Only 17%, 1/7 of Nigerian adults believe that it is right to pay your taxes and pay it correctly. 83% see nothing wrong with not paying your taxes and evading them. When we did the study for businesses, it was only slightly better. Only 29% of businesses think that they should pay the right amount of taxes. And when we asked them why, they said they do not trust government. Number two, they said we do not get sufficient fiscal exchange for the little we have paid. And number three is that the system is corrupt and it's complex. And I agree with everything they have said 100%. Unfortunately, two wrongs do not make a right. We have to fix the problem. It was not imposed on us by God or United Nations. We created the problem, so we must find the solutions. Because we have complex system, incommensurate fiscal exchange, with little or no accountability, we are unable to raise the revenue that we need for development. In fact, in one of my analyses that I did a few months ago, I concluded, based on data, that the problem is not paying high taxes. The problem is what government is using those taxes for. In my analysis, I realized that Denmark, Finland, those Nordic countries pay the highest rate of tax. Some of them pay over 60%. Imagine paying more than half of your salary in personal income tax. The GDP, the tax to GDP ratio for those countries were around 40+ percent. But when I looked at it further, the public spending to GDP was over 50%. Not only did they collect so much from their people, they spend even more for their people. And then it was not surprising when I looked at the happiness index. These two countries were number 1 and number 2. How can people pay so much in taxes and be the happiest in the world? The issue is that the tax is not the problem. It is because they are getting the value for the money that they have spent. You would want to ask, how are they able to collect 40-something and they spend 50-something? Well, they have also invested. So the taxes they collected from the people, plus the returns on their investment, including sovereign wealth fund investment, they put back into the system. Their inequality is some of the smallest in the world. Right? So, I know they gave me only 15 minutes. I probably have spent more than half of that. Now, what should we do to reform the tax system and explore non-oil revenue directions? I have 3 things, just to keep it simple. 3 things that are practical. Number 1 is to stop the bleeding and the leakages. Stop the bleeding and the leakages. What do I mean by that? We have removed fuel subsidy. That's good news. It's a big source of bleeding for these patients, remember? There's also the FS subsidy. Hopefully has also been removed. We have unproductive tax waivers, and Abubakar said it, tax expenditure, right? And even in the presentation that my brother made earlier on. The problem itself is not with the tax waivers. It is the fact that they are unproductive and sometimes distortive. It's even bad enough to be unproductive, which means I spend like 10 for the value of 2. The fact that that exercise itself discourages other people who want to create value means that the value that I'm destroying is even more than the waivers I'm giving away. We have wasteful interventions. Thank God some of them have been taken away, like RT200, like dollar for naira or naira for dollar. What does that even mean? I have to buy FX at the parallel market rate for my inputs. I manage to export. You say, by the way, I must bring my dollar back and give it to the government so that they can recognize that 460. Of course, I will refuse to bring it back. You say, okay, you know what? If only you can just bring it back, we'll give you an extra 16 naira. It still does not make sense. And then to add insult upon the injury, the central bank will now tell us at a conference or public events or press briefing that because of this, their initiative and intervention, on which they have spent hundreds of billions of naira, now some people have brought back their FX. It is painful, because you know what you are doing is wrong. And you paint it like you are the messiah for Nigeria. And then government will even give you a national award for creating so much damage to the system. We have very high costs of collection. We have contract inflation. You know that it's surprising when you sometimes see people in government, all the way to the president. I haven't seen this president complain like that, but President Buhari did it a lot. He will come and complain about MDAs not complying. I say, is it me that's supposed to fix it? The reason why you're the president is you have the powers, fix the problem. There's something called firing. You sack people, right? And you owe them zero explanation. In fact, you sack them and pick them up quickly. If I'm Nigerian, for one day, that's one day all MDAs will over comply. It's not your money, right? You don't own it. Now, in fact, until you address that leadership by example, government itself has to lead the way. If you read the Auditor General's reports, Auditor General for the Federation, which I believe is economical with the truth, even at that, the little that the Auditor General managed to say is depressing enough, including the fact that the presidency, the National Assembly, the EFCC have been defaulting in paying their taxes. Not only their own taxes, when they deduct taxes from contractors, from their employees, they do not remit, and nothing happens. Impunity. And you expect the man and the woman who is hustling inside the hot sun, inside the rain, just to make 1,000 naira a day to make ends meet, should be excited to pay their taxes. Of course, we should not be surprised that the tax morale is low. In fact, we need to commend those who are still paying their taxes in Nigeria. If I tell you that, and Budget did a very good job in one of the reports that you already have, you see that over the past 5 years alone, the interest that Nigeria paid on ways and means to the central bank is over 3 trillion naira. But that's not where I'm going. The place I'm going is, if you read the Central Bank Acts, there's a requirement that the Central Bank of Nigeria must return 75% of its surplus to the federal government, because CBN Act makes the federal government of Nigeria the sole shareholder of Central Bank. 100 billion naira, 100% owned by FGN. It says, return, right, 75% of your surplus to the federal government twice a year. I have not seen one error. We create problems for ourselves that are completely unnecessary. First, you decided you pay the central bank interest at MPR plus some spread. I don't understand why you have to pay such a high rate of interest, which increases all your numbers in the wrong direction. And then this revenue you should then collect from them by way of distribution, you haven't collected. That depresses your revenue. And then you're surprised that Moody's and everybody downgraded Nigeria, and your cost of borrowing goes up. We have to start solving our problems that we self-inflicted on ourselves. We need to harmonize multiple taxes. Officially, there are over 60 different taxes in Nigeria. Unofficially, over 200. And I say this with all authorities. I'm not making it up. I spent a long time with the manufacturers compiling these taxes. You know, the way to do it was, we just asked manufacturers, tell us the taxes you pay and who you pay to, and give us evidence of payment. In one state, River State, 197 taxes was what manufacturers alone paid. And then we say manufacturing is not growth, there is no employment. How? We tax them to death even before they have started. I know that Alhaji Aliko Dangote made a joke in one of these events where he said, if you get to heaven, angels will ask you whether you are an entrepreneur from Nigeria. If you say yes, they'll say, go to heaven because it will not be fair to punish you twice. All your suffering you have suffered already in Nigeria. So I do think that, and by the way, despite all these multiple taxes, more than 98% of the taxes we collect in Nigeria across all levels, federal, state, and local government, come from less than 8 taxes. Now, it goes against common sense that about 6 or 7 of your taxes give you almost all your revenue, but you have over 200 just to piss people off and make life impossible for them, such that the people pay so much, but government collects so little, it disappears in the middle between collection and accounting for it. If you don't solve that problem, you are not helping the country, you are helping a few people who are benefiting from the chaos. I do think, and this is also based on data, that Nigeria can generate more than 40 trillion naira in tax revenue as of today from just 5 taxes. Those taxes are personal income tax, companies income tax, including petroleum profit tax, value-added tax, property tax, and then customs and excise duties. if we repeal all the tax laws in Nigeria and stay with these 5, we will collect at least 40 trillion naira as of today. You don't need to increase the rate. You don't need to do anything. Just change how you collect. South Africa, a smaller economy than Nigeria, collected in fiscal 2021-22, their latest report. Guess how much? South Africa collected 1.9 trillion rand, equivalent to 70 trillion naira. 70 trillion naira. That's not the end of the story. Personal income tax alone in South Africa was 24 trillion naira last year. 24 trillion naira. Sorry. Now, naira equivalent. This is a country where the unemployment rate is comparable to Nigeria. I think we are like 32, 33, right? Population is less than 1/3 of Nigeria. 24 trillion. Ladies and gentlemen, the highest personal income tax Nigeria ever collected, all 36 states, Federal Capital Territory, has never been up to 1 trillion naira. Something is wrong with us fundamentally. I am very confident, even though the per capita income in South Africa is about 3 times, but I'm very confident because there's so much inequality in Nigeria that if you take the top 1/3 of Nigeria's population, they are individually on per capita basis richer than the population of South Africa. Imagine 1 trillion to 24 trillion. How much was their VAT? 17 trillion. Nigeria was celebrating 2.5 trillion as record breaking. And we even have the audacity to clap for ourselves. I told the governor of Lagos State that Lagos State has never collected 1 trillion naira in revenue. All revenues combined. They've never collected 1 trillion. But guess what? I like the example you made. I said to the governor of Lagos State, take the top 1 million properties in Lagos. There are about 3 to 4 million properties in Lagos. Exempt 75% of them. They are poor people, retired people, people with disability, place of worship. No controversy. I don't want complications. Exempt 75% of properties in Lagos completely from paying property taxes. Focus on the top 1 million. I am certain that individually, on the average, right? On the average, one of those 1 million property will be worth at least 100 million naira. Around the world, property taxes are about 1% of the value. If you do 1% of 1 million property worth 100 million naira, that's 1 trillion easy money for Lagos State. Imagine that you purposely set aside that 1 trillion. I know it will be more. For just development of Lagos State, roads, every estate. When people see that development, it makes it even easier to collect. Plus, 1% you can't pay in 1 year. Everybody knows the value of their property in Lagos apart from Lagos State government. Right? Well, I use South Africa as an example. I thought maybe I shouldn't stay with only South Africa. I've decided not to use America and the UK because you say I'm dreaming inside another dream. They say there's a way you have to wake up twice. I dreamed that I was dreaming. I looked at Kenya, right? Kenya collected equivalent of 8 trillion naira in taxes last year. 8 trillion. Population is 53 million. Per capita income is the same as Nigeria, about $2,000. If you just increase that by the population of Nigeria, we should have collected 32 trillion naira. What did we collect? Barely 10 trillion. Now, and then we need to optimize our assets and resources. Refineries, they said we spent over 10 trillion. Produce nothing. Those refineries will not work because it's human factor is the reason why they are not working. If you don't address that, you can do turnaround. You can spend $1.5 billion. Nothing will change. NNPC. I looked at Saudi Aramco. They made profit that if you convert to Naira, it will be close to the quadrillion that you were trying to wrap your head around. These guys made over $160 billion in profit and dividend to government. One company, right? Owned by government, but run with the private sector mentality. I looked at the details because I'm so much interested. I concluded that the NNPC is 25% of Saudi Aramco. If we got the efficiency of Saudi Aramco, NNPC should be giving us about $40 billion in revenue, distribution to government, and payment of taxes. What did they give us? They said that the Federation account is owing them. They have failed to give. Now, you know when they say Federation account, they mean all of us. Sometimes you want to ask yourself whether Nigeria is African magic or whether it is real. Or whether it is real. Okay, I'll move on. So I said I'll tell you three things. I told you one already. Stop the bleeding and the leakages. Number two, close the tax gap. Close the tax gap. First and foremost, you need to measure it to know what the gap looks like. I have an idea. And the idea is that without doing too much, just level between South Africa and Kenya efficiency, Nigeria would easily collect about 20% of GDP, and that's about 40 trillion. What are we collecting? About 10 plus. So easily the tax gap is between 20 to 30 trillion as of today. You need to close that. Now there are three sub-components to the tax gap. One is non-registration and non-filing gap. These people are not even in the tax net, right? Number two is under-reporting. They are in the tax net, but only one finger is inside the tax net. The rest of the body is outside. That's when you find somebody who has paid 50,000 naira tax when they should have paid 200 million naira. One finger is inside the net. This is plenty all over, right? Under-reporting. In fact, I was speaking to a top person in government a few weeks ago, and I said, one of the reasons why I recommended to them to merge revenue agencies, that thing you've seen in the press everywhere, is that Nigerian Customs Service, this guy gave me the details, right? Someone imported bulletproof, very expensive cars. Cars that without being bulletproof will be between 60 to 80 million naira. Now they are bulletproof. And then the amount declared for custom was 2 million per unit. I say people have completely lost their conscience. 2 million, is that the tire or what? To pay import duties. And then the customs service will come out and say, by the way, we have exceeded our target for custom collection. How? How? If it's not smuggled, with no import duties paid, it's grossly under-declared. So you have under-reporting tax gap. And number three is underpayment. They've reported what they think they are owing, but they still don't pay it. Either way, you don't have the money. So how do we solve the problem? Use technology for tax intelligence. I already told government, forget about tax identification number. We are not at that point. When I hear tax identification number for registering vehicle and stuff, I'll go and register in the name of my grandma in the village. She has nothing to do with the economic system, or I'll use my 4-year-old. I'll still ride the car, right? I said, discontinue with all this tax identification and just use NIN for individuals, CAC registration for businesses. And don't be too much in a hurry to collect the taxes. Tie all economic activities. I'll make your life impossible until you use NIN or the CAC registration if you're a business. You cannot get a job. You can't travel abroad. You can't get a passport. You can't open bank accounts. You can't get a payment card, right? Every economic activity, tie it to NIN. And once you are done, collect the intelligence. It will say, dear Taiwo Oyedele, from your system or from what we can see, you are worth 200 million. Can you explain this, your tax or non-payment of tax to us? Countries have moved away from asking individuals and businesses to tell us their information so we can tax them. Countries are calling taxpayers and businesses to say, by the way, we have your information. Can you please pay your tax? Then you need to then review the national tax policy, rewrite the tax laws so they are simple. You need to ensure coordination, both vertical and horizontal, between federal government as well as with subnational. And then, for example, you need to not overtax people like inputting VAT on diesel when we are still complaining about, about fuel subsidy and people struggling to cope. And lastly, number three, You need to change the tax culture and renew the social contracts. Renew the social contract. Lead by example. All government MDAs must pay their taxes 100%. Return their surplus. In fact, you should stop asking them to collect revenue. All their levies and charges and revenue should be collected by the FRS on their behalf, so you don't have to beg them. And then on their own taxes, they should remit. If they don't, fire them, right? And even politicians should pay their taxes. They should not be eligible to contest, to superintend over taxpayers' revenue where they themselves haven't complied. I raised this issue during the election period, and not many people paid attention to it. You know what happened? People wanted to be senator, governor, honorable, and whatever they call it, were required to present tax clearance certificate as part of the screening process. Many of them had no tax clearance certificate because they never paid in taxes before. The taxman made it even worse, added insult upon the injury to say, by the way, if you want to contest and you don't have tax clearance certificate, they now have categories. If it's senator, come and pay this amount. If it is House of Rep, pay this amount. They brought out that list. As if that was not bad enough, some of the politicians looked at the list for their state and they said this is too high. They went to another state where the rate was lower and bought the tax clearance certificate to come and contest. Many of them now are our leaders. We have to change that. You need to prioritize what you spend money on. Particularly, you cannot have 133 million multidimensionally poor people and then you prioritize luxury. You need to take care of them and be transparent and accountable. So I'll close by sharing the quote by Winston Churchill that says, for a nation to try to tax